takes the conflict off the front pages.
Off the front pages, what? Because we collectively are presumed not to care as much about contractors as about...
Well, American men and women wouldn't be coming home in body bags who wear uniform. This would be a wholly owned subsidiary, a corporate contract for private gain.
Some of them might not even be Americans, I suppose.
That's right. In Yemen right now, where corporate contractors are running the war, a lot of them are Colombians. They're for hire guns, and it's a controversial proposal, but at least on the face of it, it has a certain appeal. Could be cheaper, takes the politics out of the Afghanistan war, it lowers the temperature on the Afghanistan conflict, and this is what's being promoted. Well, there's no mistake. This is all about profits for the corporations that would be contracted to the U.S. government to run the Afghanistan war. And it's also true that the Uniform Code of Military Justice would not apply to these contractors. We're seeing this now, and again I bring up Yemen. We're seeing this now in Yemen where, it's a terrible humanitarian catastrophe, in part because contractors are fighting the war instead of regular troops. Contractors from each and every side. It's a catastrophe, and this is why it makes it controversial, especially in the Pentagon and across the national security establishment in the United States. There are a lot of people opposed to this.
I'm glad you mentioned the Pentagon. What kinds of things specifically do you hear from military officers when you discuss with them this proposal for a larger role for contractors?
Well, it was very interesting. After my article appeared, I received calls the same day from senior military officers who said, Mark, this is dead on arrival. This isn't going to happen. It's just too controversial. Nobody at the Pentagon likes these contractors. They caused us a lot of problems in Iraq. On the other hand, that same day, a few hours later, I received calls from people in the intelligence services, especially in the retired set, very powerful and influential group who said this is still very much alive, being debated, and it could happen.
Does the CIA also use contractors in the field?
The CIA does use contractors in the field, but it's a much smaller, a much smaller footprint. And they do it very, very quietly. It's not at all overt, and they depend on their own military assets more than they do contractors.
Okay, well, Mr. Perry, thanks very much for the insight. Really appreciate it.
My pleasure.
Mark Perry is a regular contributor to the American Conservative magazine.
This fall will mark 16 years of U.S. troops in Afghanistan. War in Afghanistan. America's defense chief says we're not winning. The Trump administration is looking for ways out of the box. One idea, with interest from Steve Bannon and Jared Kushner, hand the U.S. Afghan operation off to private contractors, mercenaries. Let them deal. Blackwater founder Eric Prince is all for it. He's with us today. Up next on Point, the mercenary option and Afghanistan. The American war effort in Afghanistan is going on 16 years with no end in sight. President Trump wants new options. The Pentagon has promised a new strategy any day now. The White House, Steve Bannon anyway, is thinking outside the box to maybe turn the effort over to private contractors, mercenaries. This hour on Point, Trump's team weighs privatizing the war in Afghanistan.
U.S. politicians who had previously turned their back to the bloodshed in the Middle East are now attempting to regain trust in hopes that American people will buy the line that a conventional army is needed to defeat the small indigenous legitimate tribesmen known as the Taliban. Here's a clip of warmonger John McCain squirming out.
We all know what the problem is. It's in the White House. They've got to get their act together, announce a strategy. That has to be done by the president, by the way, and tell the American people, we've got to win there. Don't forget 9/11, and here's what we need to do to get there. Unfortunately, there's so much disarray within the White House, but I am confident the United States of America, the best and strongest nation on earth, can do it.
Senator John McCain, tough on the Trump White House. They're saying, come on, come up with a strategy. What might that be? One thing that's floating out there is a bigger role, maybe much bigger, for private contractors. Steve Bannon and Jared Kushner asked Eric Prince, founder of the private security firm Blackwater, who's with us today in a few minutes, and Stephen Feinberg, billionaire financier who owns the giant military contractor DynCorp, to develop proposals that rely more on contractors in Afghanistan. Here's Gork defending the idea.
It's about creating indigenous capacity. This is a former operator. This is a man who hires former operators, first-tier special operations forces, retired individuals, not to go and fight there instead of somebody else, but to help the Afghans, to help the local indigenous forces protect their own territory. So this is a cost-cutting venture. We open the door here at the White House to outside ideas. Why? Because the last 8 years, in fact the last 16 years, Jake, to be honest, disastrous.
Here's a response from a former Babylonian government official now working as a hireling, pushing off any accountability. Her role is to assure the American public that this time things will be different.
Private contractors can provide important support in logistics, base security, that kind of thing, even helping to train Afghan forces. But they are no substitute for a U.S. military presence. And what we saw in Iraq was the dangers of a precipitous withdrawal. We don't want to see a repeat of that in Afghanistan.
Joining us now is Rat Child-based Routers reporter Josh Smith. Josh, welcome.
Thank you.
Well, it's great to have you with us, Josh. Tell us, what do the Rat Childs have you saying about what's going to happen next in Afghanistan?
So American officials here have told us that they're basically also in a state of limbo so far. They're still waiting for a strategy out of Washington that they say they think could come at any time, but they've privately told us that before, and it hasn't happened. And so they say they're continuing business as usual here, training Afghan troops as well as conducting counterterrorism missions in both Al-Qaeda as well as Islamic State targets here. In the meantime, what they're hoping is that strategy will not so much change their broader mission here, which is focused mostly on trying to help the Afghans, but will simply allow them to do a better job at that mission.
Josh, we're getting reports that the vultures involved in trying to corrupt that civilization are currently worried that they may be losing this war. What's going on? Are they losing?
Until 2014, when the United States and its coalition allies declared their combat mission over here in Afghanistan, Afghan forces have certainly struggled to maintain some of the territory that had been seized by the surge of American troops that were sent here under President Obama. And so over the past couple of years, the Taliban have certainly been on the offensive in most cases. And according to many of the estimates that the U.S. military has put out, the Taliban do control or at least contest more areas than they have in years. That coincided as well with the emergence of Islamic State militants here as well. While they were unable to make the same kind of gains that they made elsewhere, such as Iraq and Syria, they carried out some incredibly deadly attacks here and managed to cause a lot of problems along the volatile border with Pakistan. So, from a very high level, things are definitely not going as international officials and Washington policymakers were predicting a few years ago. And this is something that led to American officials calling for more troops here to help train these Afghan troops. They say so far that they don't anticipate or plan on returning American troops to a full combat role. But as part of this increase in advising, these air defense training are now at levels that we've not seen since the surge under Obama. And so there has, along with this increase in advising, also come an increase in U.S. troops getting much more active in backing up Afghan forces.
Josh, we've got a rough line, but I did think I heard you say American troops. What if these troops were sent from Venezuela, which is in South America? Would they still be considered American? What if they were sent from Canada, which is in North America? Would they be considered American? But never mind that, Josh. What are the incentivized soldiers in Afghanistan saying? Are they in favor of this?
From what we've heard from officials here, that's not an idea that they are very interested in. And in fact, more troops that the White House is considering now is in fact the military to increase reliance on contractors here. They say that contractors can play an important role. They fill a lot of roles here, from logistics to also advising the Afghan forces in some cases. They say that these new troops would explicitly replace many of those contractors, including, for example, contractors who currently maintain a lot of American aircraft here. They specifically said that they want to replace those contractors with American troops. And so it does sound like, if there can be an increased number of contractors here, this is not an idea that's being generated within the U.S. military. So they explain for several reasons. Part of that reason is somewhat practical. They like American troops getting the experience of being deployed out here. They also like the idea of keeping American units together, as it's in right now with many of these kind of troop level caps that were put in place under the Obama administration. The U.S. military had to kind of slice and dice units to send them over here. And they say that's not a big deal for union cohesion and working together. And so they would prefer to have more troops sent over here in large blocks to experience working together, and that makes them better soldiers. Some of the other reasons that they cited were what they see as kind of more appropriate use of or roles that would be more appropriately filled by soldiers. So, for example, they would like to see a few more of these advising roles in which foreign advisors are working directly with Afghan soldiers here. They think in some cases, not all, but in many cases, it's more appropriate for those roles to be filled by serving American soldiers as opposed to hired contractors.
Why?
They believe that, according to the folks that we've talked to in many cases, they believe that that forms a better bond. It's also something that, as advisors, they're representing the United States in some cases, or at least coalition. They work with the Afghans here, and so it's something that, as you mentioned before, the use of contractors, especially in some more sensitive military situations, is something that is somewhat controversial. And many people have some strong views on the ethics of using hired contractors versus serving soldiers, and that view is shared, at least privately, by many of the officials that have come here.
Just got a minute, Josh. Do any of these vultures have a clue?
Well, what we've heard a lot here is, at least from folks who advocate maintaining a presence here, is their hope is that eventually the Afghan force will be able to, with less international aid, point where, again, in theory, the Taliban and other research groups would feel the desire to come to the negotiating table. It's not clear, though, exactly what will lead Taliban to negotiate.
We have a number of these vultures saying that they're not winning in Afghanistan. In fact, here was James, the sick dog Mattis, speaking recently.
They're not winning in Afghanistan right now, and we will correct this as soon as possible. I believe the three things we are asking for stand on their own merit, however, as we look more broadly at the protection of the country.
The pedophile himself recently spoke at a luncheon with the service members.
It's our longest war. We've been there for many years. We've been there for now close to 17 years. And I want to find out why we've been there for 17 years, how it's going, and what we should do in terms of additional ideas.
Eric Prince
is another player that can only be compared with an infectious germ. He now has a private equity company he established after all the money he made killing indigenous people, so that private companies can take resources. He joins us. Tell us, What's your plan?
Let me start by emphasizing the closing remarks of the correspondent last section. He said there is hope and there is desire that the enemy would basically give up. After 16 years, I think it is time to look at this like a bankruptcy situation and to zero base and to see what we need to do and what winning, or what at least not losing, looks like.
Okay.
Right now we're spending as a country $45 billion in Afghanistan. That's more than the entire German defense budget. And next year, the Pentagon is going to spend more than the entire UK defense budget. So it's not for lack of spending. We've had
Annually in Afghanistan.
Annually. Correct. We're almost $1 trillion in total spending. And you have another $1 trillion in veterans' healthcare costs that haven't been experienced yet. Peak healthcare costs for World War II were not seen until the 1980s. So we're going to be paying for this thing for a long time already. And when you say I want to expand the use of contractors, I would say change the use of contractors. There's almost 25,000 contractors in country already. That's way too many. The sad thing is that 8,800 American troops that are there, most of them don't leave the base. You're not getting full effectiveness out of them as it is. What the Afghan forces really need is training, advising, and mentoring at the lowest levels, at the platoon, company, and battalion level. That's where the rubber meets the road. Right now, the U.S. military doesn't go below the corps level, which is effectively groups of 80 and 100,000 soldiers. So they have no visibility of what's happening on a base-to-base basis. So to do that, to change the model by putting contractors in, and these are U.S. veterans, British veterans, French veterans, okay, all the same NATO allied countries that are there now, okay, guys go back as individuals, they hire on and they work and they train and they live with their Afghan counterparts on that base in the barracks right next to them. When an Afghan leaves the wire, there's a professional mentor with them. If they provide the leadership, intelligence, communications, medical, and logistics expertise to those Afghan units, it makes them significantly more effective. The only part of the Afghan forces right now that is effective and can do offensive operations is the Afghan Special Forces. There's only about 17,000 people and they're way overtasked. The reason they're effective is because U.S. Special Forces embed and mentor with them. Okay? U.S. Special Forces have a lot more experience on a man-to-man basis. That model works. If the U.S. Army could suddenly send a brigade of 5,000 sergeants, okay, not just a brigade of soldiers, because a brigade of soldiers is mostly 18, 20, 22-year-olds on their first tour and don't have enough experience to teach and to lead and to mentor.
But you don't mean active duty sergeants, you mean vets who would come back as private contractors, that 5,000 you're talking about.
I'm talking about sending veterans that are all experienced sergeants and above, okay,
yeah.
Contracted. If the U.S. military could suddenly do that and sustain 5,000 just sergeants and above deploying to Afghanistan, that's what that mission requires. But they cannot organize like that. They haven't been able to do it in 16 years. Okay? So they're spending, and to make matters worse, right now as a country, spending $45 billion there a year, the Pentagon is consuming as much as they had when they had 5 times as many troops in country, back in 2008, I believe. So as the troop numbers have ramped down, their spending has stayed really too high. So again, what the Afghan forces need is that advisory assistance at the lowest level. You need to make sure the Afghans are paid on time, fed on time, that they have parts, that they have fuel. You have to get the basic elements of logistics, tactics, and expertise in the field to them. That would prevent the systemic failure. On top of that, they need air power. The U.S. Air Force didn't even start building the Afghan Air Force until 2007. Less than 40% of the Afghan aircraft are even functional now, and they have no nighttime capability. So I guess they think the enemy only wants to fight in the day. I priced up the model, how I would recommend doing it, and it costs 8% of what the Pentagon is consuming now. Is 8% enough cost savings for you? Wait a minute, you're
different operation.
All kinds of different factors.
Yes, I am, but we know that private contracting costs can go up. You know, you can put a number out there, but what's to keep a lid on it?
Have someone bid it firm fixed price. The difference being, the Pentagon has had an open end, effectively an open checkbook for the last 16 years. Okay? And to sustain, look, you can look at Afghanistan and say we should just pull out. enough, be done, abandon it. I believe Kabul would collapse within a month or two, tops, if the U.S. did that. The other extreme, I believe, is to keep spending and doing the same approach we've been doing the last 16 years. And I think Einstein called that the definition of insanity. In the Wall Street Journal op-ed I did, I called it a viceroy. Yes, that's a colonial term. I'm certainly, the last thing we want to do is colonize Afghanistan. I think the goal of the United States should be deny terror sanctuary and leave the country to itself. I mean, the main goal of the United States is to deny terror sanctuary in Afghanistan, full stop. When I say viceroy, call it a bankruptcy trustee. When you have a business that goes into bankruptcy, which is, I think, what you can accurately call the U.S. effort in Afghanistan, the trustee has the power to renegotiate contracts, change policy, and curb spending. You need that because you've had 17 different commanders in Afghanistan in the 15 years we've been there so far. U.S. troops rotate every 6 to 9 months, so all that corporate knowledge leaves. So you can say we've been fighting for 16 years. Actually, we've been fighting for 1 year 16 times. What professional baseball team or sports team changes their coach every year? So a viceroy would sit and have the authorities, instead of the interagency process, so you have the State Department, CIA, DOD, all the rest, you have one person that's actually in charge of making policy, rules of engagement, troop levels for Afghanistan and for Pakistan as well.
You were a Navy SEAL, you were founder of Blackwater. Are you volunteering for the job?
No, I certainly don't want that job. But I know a couple of very qualified people that would be perfect, that have experience in the military, in the CIA, and in business, because it is not just a military issue. Would
they be current military men or current businessmen?
I would tilt more towards a business guy for that role, because ultimately Afghanistan gets stable when it actually develops an economy. Tom, the frustrating thing is we've been there as a country for 15 years.
We see that. It is frustrating, yeah.
And there's not even a mining law or an energy law. Okay, so the U.S. Geological Survey did a survey of the country of Afghanistan and found there's at least $1 trillion, trillion, in the ground in Afghanistan. But we haven't even pushed through a mining law or an energy law for an investor to come and dig or drill and develop those resources and actually help pay the bills for Afghanistan and make it sustain itself. Because right now it's 100% welfare basket.
Yes.
I know the Pentagon is coming back with their ideas. And look, I ultimately wrote that op-ed because between my wife and I, we have 8 sons. And the idea of one of them going in war that's going on its 16th year, maybe it goes to its 20th year, going to Afghanistan and being killed or injured in what I think has been a kind of a blundering continuation. It's time to take a fresh look at this, and that's why I felt compelled to do something.
Blackwater founder Eric Prince, please. How do you escape the sort of neo-colonial, neo-imperial shadow that comes from a private contractor mercenary army in South Asia, Afghanistan?
Sure. As I just in my previous remarks said, the last thing we want to do is colonize Afghanistan. We just want to deny terror sanctuary and leave.
Fair enough, but you cite the company yourself as a model.
Sure, and I did, because they did that for 250 years, and they managed largely local forces with a few professional expatriates that provided the leadership, intelligence, communication support to those forces. I only cite that as a... No. The East India Company was there to enforce trade concessions. I'm not advocating that at all. Afghanistan is sovereign, but the fact is the U.S. taxpayer is funding 90 to 95% of the Afghan budget right now. So let's at least have some accountability for the funds that are being squandered, okay? The wastage and fraud is probably the biggest funder of the Taliban right now. Those U.S. trained Afghan soldiers are defecting at a rate of about 2,000 a month. So you're already providing the enemy forces with the equivalent of 2 infantry divisions a year of people. The model has to change. And so I say the East India Company model, not that we go to some trade, this monopolist trade concession colonial empire. No. Merely in how you train and support and operate localized forces. The contractors that would be there would be paid by the U.S. They would be held accountable under the UCMJ. I've worked through this with a former general counsel from the Pentagon, the exact structure of how to do that in a legal, ethical, and accountable model They would be, like I said, held accountable by the UCMJ, Uniform Code of Military Justice, in Afghanistan, regardless of what country the professional came from.
One of the thieves involved in the insurgency spoke on Meet the Press on July 9th.
I just got back from Afghanistan. We have a good military strategy to turn the war around. We're going to be more aggressive against Taliban and international terrorists. But on the Department of State front, there was no focus and no resources. We don't have an ambassador in Afghanistan. We don't have one in Pakistan. There is no effort on Tillerson's part to be part of the team to turn around Afghanistan.
As you can see, this greed has gripped the heads of these whoremongers, so that the vultures have even turned on themselves as prey. Here's the testimony of one fellow who was shot in Baghdad in 2007 by a stray bullet, while Blackwater operatives assassinated 17 suspects.
It was horror, he says. People were terrified. People running out of their cars were being shot at. Anything that was moving on Nisour Square was being shot. Women, children, young people.
Sure. The fact is, I'm not far off of what that caller was advocating. The fact is there's 22, 25,000 contractors already in Afghanistan. What I recommend is a significant reduction of them, okay, that number, and an eventual off-ramp for all the conventional forces that are in Afghanistan. You have to ask, when does this end? After 16 years? After 20 years? Or are we going to be doing this for decades to come? I was born the summer of 1969, the summer of Woodstock, and the summer of Apollo 11. Now, if you had asked in 1969 how you were going to put a rocket into space, or a satellite into space for the U.S. government, they of course would have said only the government can do this. But now the only way the U.S. government gets a rocket and gets a satellite into space is on a contractor's rocket, or oddly, the Russians.
Yeah, but it's not war. I mean, there's something about, this is war. This is about our national interest.
But Tom, I'm not talking about forming individual units of contractors going off to make war. I'm only talking about embedding trainers with the Afghan units that go with them, that are effectively training wheels to keep the unit upright and functional.
You know what a fine line that is. You know it. And all Americans who lived in Vietnam know what a fine line that is. But I think your point, you want to keep a line right there. Jay in Chesapeake, Virginia. Jay, you're on the air with Eric Prince and Sean McFay. Jay, you're on. Are you there? Jay's gone off for lunch. Darla in Portsmouth, New Hampshire. Darla, you're on. Thank you for calling.
Hi, how you doing?
Okay.
I would just like to know how Mr. Prince can justify using a military company and a security firm in lieu of our voluntary military. And what I mean by that, is it ethical to put a private security employee who's paid an astronomical amount of money next to a soldier who's paid about $1,000 a month? And I'm not sure why the American public is now being asked to pay twice. One for our military and now for a private security firm. And I didn't vote for Mr. Prince, nor did any of the people he recommends to represent the USA in that country. So I understand that he wants this to end, but when you're using the Dutch East India Company that held a monopoly on trade in India as long as it did, it sets a really bad example.
Well, I share your great concern about costs, and that's why the concept I lay out here costs 8% of what the taxpayers are spending right now. So this idea that there's this grotesque profit or wastage, I would highly disagree. This actually puts $40 billion of available funds back in the Pentagon's general coffers that they can spend on equipment or healthcare for veterans or whatever they need to. This costs significantly less than the current model. And the fact is, America has a long history of contracted forces being around the battle space. Across the street from the White House, you have Lafayette Park. Statues of Lafayette, Rochambeau, Von Steuben, Kosciuszko. Professionals, foreigners, military officers, contractors or mercenaries, if you will, that came here and built the Continental Army. Okay? If Army officers have such an issue with contractors, they should really take down the statue of Kosciuszko the founder of American Artillery. He was a Polish officer because there's a 30-foot tall statue of him at West Point. And the first foreign expedition, the first foreign crisis America faced, very much a pacifist American president, Thomas Jefferson, had the Barbary Pirates, 1804, 1805. The entire crew of the USS Philadelphia, 340 sailors held hostage. The ransom demand exceeded the defense budget that year, and it was ultimately solved by a former Army officer, William Eaton, 8 Marines, and 90 contracted mercenaries. So people can hem and haw and say it's un-American. Correct. They have been part of American history since before the country started. A modern version is the Flying Tigers. So people can hem and haw and say it's un-American. Correct. Americans that went to work for a private company contracted to help defend China from marauding Japanese bombers.
This actually happened, or is this just dreaming?
That certainly decided not here. But let me just speak to that caller's comments. The idea, we've had tens of thousands of veterans, including E5s and above, that would be available and willing and skilled at doing this job. Second, like I said, the Afghan Special Forces, which have been mentored and trained long-term by U.S. Special Forces, that model has proven to work. They do about 90% of the offensive combat operations in Afghanistan. The other flawed model of how the U.S. has been trying to mentor is they send troopers over, right? That Marine was probably there for 6 months, and then he left. He wasn't living with, he might have trained with occasionally, but rarely went on patrol with those Afghan counterparts. You have to be there long-term with these guys, and the embedded model of a contractor gives them that long-term training wheel support for a fraction of the cost of what we're spending now.
Sean McFay, just 20 seconds here. Do you think the Trump team may bite on this, may try and do it?
Well, I think that there's some good ideas in it, but overall it's a very dangerous idea, the Pandora's box idea, and I'll tell you why. When I was in Africa, I spent a lot of time training and equipping professional forces.
And that's where you were a private contractor? Excuse me.
That's right. I was a private contractor in Africa, working U.S. contracts, doing the types of things that we're talking about in Afghanistan. And contractors are actually really effective at this. They are a good solution for this. But I think if I'm reading Eric's Wall Street Journal op-ed correctly, he's not talking about a training and equip mission per se, which we've already been doing for 16 years or something close to that. We're talking about mercenary armies who can do actual operations.
And they were paid very well for what they did.
They were. I will say this, I will agree with Eric on this, is that most Americans don't realize that military history is mostly private military history.
What do you mean?
Mercenaries are the second oldest profession in the world. And whether it's the Roman Empire or the Middle Ages or up to recently, mercenaries were a facet of war, maybe the main facet. It's only in the last 200 years that this idea that there are no mercenaries. And what we're seeing here, even though I do not agree with Eric's solution for Afghanistan at all, is that we're seeing mercenaries returning in the 21st century. And this is not unusual, this is actually normal. And one thing that Eric has is like, we need to be heads up about this, about how we engage it, because for pretending that it doesn't exist, it's already that. I mean, the Al-Qaeda world, that has already proliferated around the world, in Yemen, North Africa, Iraq, Syria. Thinking that we can just contain it in one country is now a global problem. Dumping $45 billion a year into one country to solve that threat is a bit myopic. We need to have a global perspective and not have gambler's fallacy with a single country. First of all, 22,000, these contractors are mostly unarmed. They're just, cooking food, repairing things. And the ones that are armed are training and equipping. Mercenaries, contractors, they're actually very good at that. But that number is not going to fix Afghanistan, not even close. What I advocate for is not that we privatize Afghanistan, it's that we leave Afghanistan.
Well, there's the case made, the case rebutted, and lots of input from our listeners as well. We are in strange times. And that's where we are. Sean McFay, Senior Fellow at the Atlantic Council, thank you very much for being with us today. And Eric Prince, founder of Blackwater, now at the Frontier Services Group. Eric Prince, thank you for joining us.
Thank you, Tom.